My cousin Holly arrived from Houston on the bus, and Pa and Ma went to pick her up. I'd wanted to go into town and maybe meet up with some friends from school, but Ma said there wouldn't be enough room in the pickup. So I spent the afternoon helping Uncle Eddie in the barn. I saw her getting out of the car. She was 16, just a few years older than me, though she looked more mature than I expected, taller, paler, and with a kind, thoughtful expression. Her eyes met mine in a curious way that made me feel self-conscious. I held out my hand and said, "How you do?" She briefly shook it, then turned to Ma, and they headed inside together. It was the start of a long summer, and I had no one my age around to talk to. My brother Randy had passed away a few years back, and without him, the days felt quieter. With Holly visiting, the house felt fuller, and even though she spent most of her time talking with Ma, her presence gave the place a different energy. Having Holly around was both interesting and frustrating. She was older, thoughtful, and always seemed to have something to say to Ma. I didn't understand most of it, but it was clear they were close. She had a unique presence, kind, graceful, and calm. She had wavy brown hair that hung past her shoulders and a sweet, upturned nose that made her look like she belonged in one of those old-time movie posters. Marvin, who worked down at the gas station with Uncle Eddie, once said she was a real peach, and apparently Pa had already warned one of the bleacher boys to show some respect after acting too forward. I noticed we had more visitors than usual during her stay. At church, when I walked in beside her, I could feel eyes turning our way. I'd never felt that before. I guess I started to notice her more, but being around girls wasn't something I was used to. I didn't have sisters or close female cousins growing up. Every time I tried to talk to her, I got nervous and tongue-tied. Still, I found myself thinking about her often. Sometimes I'd just watch her from a distance, not in a creepy way, just curious. She was confident, and there was something about the way she moved that seemed different from anyone I knew. At dinner one night, I caught myself staring when she reached for the biscuits. She noticed, smiled politely, and I looked away quickly, feeling my face heat up. That week, I probably didn't say more than a dozen words to her, but her presence stayed with me. I'd lie awake at night, wondering what she thought of the farm, of me, of life outside Houston. That Saturday was blazing hot. No one wanted to do much of anything. Pa and Uncle Eddie headed into town, probably for a few errands and maybe a cool drink or two. Ma took a nap in her room. I stretched out on a bench in the yard and shut my eyes against the sun, just drifting in thought. When I opened them again, I saw Holly sitting on the porch steps, leaning back on her hands, her shoulders relaxed. She looked peaceful, fanning herself slowly, as if lost in her own world. After a while, she stood up and walked over, holding a small towel and a bag. "Your ma said there's a swimming hole nearby," she said. "I could use a dip to cool off. Would you show me the way?" "It's about half a mile," I said, sitting up. "Just down the track by the barn. You take the path past the big trees with all that Spanish moss." She tilted her head and gave a half smile. "I meant I'd like you to come with me. I might get turned around in those woods." I hesitated, then nodded. "All right, I'll take you." It wasn't much, just a small creek-fed pool surrounded by trees, but on a day like that, it was about the best place you could be. I didn't know if I really wanted to show her the swimming hole. It wasn't much of a secret, everyone around had heard of it, but it was at the edge of Pa's land and hidden enough that only family really used it. Randy had first shown it to me when I was little, and after he passed, I hadn't been there much. It was one of those quiet, slightly airy spots where the breeze never quite felt right and shadows seemed to watch you from under the trees. But with the summer heat, the water there would be the deepest and coolest for miles. We walked mostly in silence. The path was overgrown, and I realized she probably wouldn't have found it on her own. When we finally reached the creek, I was surprised. It wasn't nearly as dark or spooky as I remembered. Sunlight danced on the water, and it looked more inviting than ever. Holly looked around and smiled. "Would you mind heading back up the path a bit? I'd like a little privacy for a quick dip." I blinked, caught off guard, but nodded. Sure. And Jack, she added, her tone playful. No peeking. I laughed nervously and walked back toward the trees, trying not to feel too awkward. I sat on a fallen log, listening to the rustling leaves and distant splashes, staring at the sky. I'll admit I was curious, but I knew better than to ruin her trust. Still, my thoughts wandered more than they should have. It was strange, feeling all these things I didn't quite understand yet. After a while, I heard her voice again. Okay, I'm done. I stood up quickly and brushed the dust off my jeans. As I turned, she was drying her hair with a towel, looking calm and refreshed. Then she looked right at me, with a little smirk. So, did you behave? I froze for a second, my face heating up. Of course, I mumbled. She laughed lightly. Good. Just checking. We started back toward the house, the path crunching underfoot. Thanks for showing me, she said gently. No problem, I replied, still not sure what exactly had passed between us, but knowing something had shifted. And with that, we walked side by side through the trees, the air cooler now, and the silence a little less awkward than before. She shrugged. Suit yourself, and with a half smile, turned and walked back up the path. I waited until the sound of her footsteps faded into the trees, then pulled off my shirt and stepped into the water. I wasn't about to stand around completely uncovered, just in case Holly was pulling some kind of joke. Once I was deep enough in the pool, I quietly let the rest of my clothes go and tossed them onto the grass. The water felt amazing, cool, calm, almost like it was carrying the heat and the worry right out of me. I floated for a long time, just drifting and staring up at the sky through the branches. At some point, I started to feel different. Not bad, just off. Like the world had shifted ever so slightly around me. I glanced toward the bank, ready to head back, but my clothes were gone. My heart skipped. I looked around, confused, then heard rustling from the trees. Holly stepped back into view, holding something. Hey, Jack, wherever you're hiding, I figured you'd need something to wear. I brought these from the house, she said, gently setting them down. I'll leave them here for you. She turned and disappeared again. I swam over, pulled myself out, and looked at what she'd left, a lightweight dress and a pair of soft underthings. My first reaction was to think she was joking, but then I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the water. I leaned in closer, not believing what I was seeing. The person looking back at me wasn't the same. My face was different. My whole body was different. I looked younger, softer, like a girl. I sat down, stunned. I didn't know how it happened or why. All I knew was that something had changed, something big. With shaking hands, I put on the clothes. They fit perfectly. I took a deep breath and walked slowly back up the trail. Holly was waiting for me under a tree, her expression calm and understanding. How do you feel? She asked. I hesitated. Strange. Everything feels new. I get it, she said quietly. It happened to me too. When I was about your age. I looked up at her, surprised. Really? Yeah, she said, nodding. That's why I brought the clothes just in case. I wasn't sure it would happen again, but I thought it might. I let out a breath. 100 questions swirled in my head, but somehow I felt a little less alone. I looked at her and asked, so, does this mean we'll both be going to school in Houston in the fall? She smiled warmly. Looks like it.